Hello, hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming to Outreach today. Yeah, please get seated. Thank you. All right, so thanks again for coming. Seems like this is a topic that many of you are very interested in. So I'm Johnny. I head up the product design team here at Outreach in Prague. And Outreach is basically a B2B SaaS startup with headquarters in Seattle and an R&D center here in Prague. And today we'll have 3 talks. I'll kick off, and then we'll have 2 more case studies by Michael and by DJ. And of course, we can stay a little bit later afterwards for some drinks and more interesting conversations. So I'm always interested to know who's in the audience. So show of hands, who is a designer? Who is a product manager? Okay, any engineers? Right? Others? Okay, cool. And how many of you are currently working on AI-powered products? Show of hands. Okay, quite a few. As I thought. Good stuff. All right, so I'll kick off today. And I want to share some of my thoughts on generative AI in general and its impact on product design. And then we'll have 2 awesome case studies. So I think by now, every single person in this room must have heard of generative AI. And let's get straight to the point. I think generative AI is a disruptive innovation, and it's one of those technological breakthroughs that happens and appears once in a while. There's actually a definition of disruptive innovation proposed by the mastermind of innovation theory himself, by Clayton Christensen, who said, so he's basically saying that disruptive innovation is a situation where you have small new entrants to the market who use technology to basically disrupt the market and gain some market share at the expense of the incumbent established businesses. I think that's pretty much what's happening here. This is what disruptive innovation looks like in practice. When ChatGPT was released last year in November, it became the technology with the fastest adoption curve ever. So I'm wondering, how many of you have heard of OpenAI, the company, let's say 2 years ago? Okay, not many. And how many of you know OpenAI now? Pretty much everyone, right? So that is disruptive innovation. And I think GenAI is going to be absolutely huge. Basically, I think we are witnessing the 5th content revolution in the history of humankind. First, it was the alphabet and the written script some 6,000 years ago, which enabled content preservation across time. Then we had the printing press around 1436, which enabled content replication at scale. 1983. The internet arrived, enabled content transmission at scale. Fast forward to 2007, the smartphone or the iPhone, which really kind of kickstarted the revolution, enabled content consumption at scale. Everyone has a computer in their pocket nowadays. And now, the last one, 2022, generative AI and large language models arrived, which now enables content creation at scale. And you'll notice that the first 3 breakthroughs happened basically during our lifetimes, if you're old enough, like some of us. But the first 2 breakthroughs were basically thousands of years apart. So that means we're on an exponential curve. And if that makes you feel better, actually, even GenAI didn't happen overnight, right? It was decades in the making before it finally exploded in November 2022. And it's interesting that we have actually been designing superpowers of this kind for some time, even before GenAI exploded. For example, I remember back in 2016, I was designing my first machine learning powered feature when working on the Trainline app. So these things have been around. It's just now with GenAI and LLMs, these features can be so much more powerful than before. So I wonder what is going to be the next big thing that the GenAI innovation will enable in turn, and how quickly, how soon will we see it happening? Right, so now I would like to talk a little bit about the AI-powered features we built and shipped at Outreach to give you some ideas about what's happening in the B2B sales software area and productivity software in general. I'm guessing you might have shipped or are working on similar features as well. Just to briefly explain what is Outreach, it's basically a productivity tool for sales teams. It's great for engaging prospects with semi-structured sequences of communications using various channels like email, calls, messaging, LinkedIn, text, etc. And our platform also covers forecasting and deal closing and pipeline management workflows. And as you would imagine, there's tons of content that's being generated and processed throughout all those workflows. And that's because sales is basically all about communication, right? And about information exchange. So we deal with quite a lot of different content types. And we use all that content to train our AI models to make them more effective or more accurate and to enhance the specificity of their output. We have over 6,000 customers on the platform, and some of those customers have fairly large sales teams. So basically all those customers and their teams, they generate about 33 million buyer-seller interactions every single week. So that's a lot of data, a lot of insight we can analyze at scale, of course, and do interesting things with. Of course, everything is anonymized, and also we have very strict controls on data security and privacy. But yeah, aggregating all that at scale allows us to do interesting stuff. So one of the first AI-powered features we shipped, actually already 3 years ago, back then, before GenAI, is this report that basically analyzes the sentiment of email replies. So it basically tells you whether the email reply was positive, negative, whether there was an objection, or if the person recommended for you to speak to someone else instead, for example. Then 2 years ago, we launched this conversational intelligence bot we call Kaya, which basically is a bot you drop into your Zoom meeting, and it transcribes the conversation in real time, and it also listens to everything that's being said, which then allows the sales rep to get real-time hints and prompts. So, for example, this one, where it basically tells the sales rep how to react to some of the questions he might have just kind of received from the buyer. So in this case, for example, it's telling him that ABC, that's the company that the seller works for, has got these competitive differentiators against some of the other companies. So basically, as the conversation unfolds, the rep gets real-time hints and feedback, and also Gaia listens to all the actions that are mentioned, so that at the end of the call, it can basically summarize all the action points for the rep, like that. After the meeting has finished, you can go to watch the recording, replay it, and you will see who spoke, when, right, like for how long, etc. You would expect some functions like that these days. But also it analyzes topics. You will see on the right-hand side. It tells you which topics were mentioned and what was the sentiment of those topics. Was it positive, negative? And if you click on one of these buttons, it basically jumps right into the moment where that utterance happened in the conversation. So pretty awesome. Also, I'm really excited about this feature we shipped pretty recently. We call it Smart Meeting Assist. It basically gives you a quick summary, auto-generated summary of the whole transcript from the recording. So you don't even have to replay the session or read through the transcript. You can basically look at the summary and get a gist of what was discussed in that meeting in just a couple of seconds. And also you can ask it questions. So you can basically ask, for example, did a competitor come up? Or what did people think about feature XYZ? Or you can ask, who is the decision maker on the deal? So it's pretty cool. And what's also quite awesome is that we have been using this feature for our UX research as well, because those auto-generated summaries are actually super useful. They speed up our research workflow by quite a bit. Also got a bunch of features for sales forecasting and pipeline management. So, for example, this one tells you, based on historical data, how likely is the sales team to hit their quarterly quota, based on deal closing success rates in the past. And for active deals, you can see this cool dashboard that basically gives you a timeline of the buyer and seller engagement or activities, color-coded like that, buyer and seller. And It also gives you a deal health score, which is basically calculated based on a number of different signals. And the deal health score, in this case it's 41, the deal is at risk. It tells you what has been going well and where to focus next and what are the suggested next actions for you as a seller. So pretty cool. So since generative AI and large language models exploded, we immediately jumped on it because we believe it's got the potential to really 10x the productivity of our users. And given that we have our own AI layer, it enables us to basically build new features and capabilities so much faster and so much quicker. We can integrate with the various LLMs as well, and we can train our features based on the sales data we have. DJ will tell you a little bit more about it in his case study later today. Cool, so now I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about the impact of GenAI on product design as a discipline and how our craft might evolve in the coming years in response to the GenAI tsunami that's coming. I've got 4 hypotheses. My first hypothesis is that graphical user interfaces for user input will be receding and will be slowly disappearing. And what I mean by that, so most of us would probably prefer to go to something like Google Analytics or Amplitude and just say, for example, tell me about any significant changes in the customer behavior in the last 2 months, as opposed to having to click a lot of buttons, apply a bunch of filters, connect a bunch of tables, right? So I think very soon AI copilots will be able to go and click the right buttons for you, so to speak, and apply the right filters and data manipulations. So I believe that some of the traditional UI patterns for user input will be replaced by natural language input or might be replaced by gestural interfaces. Think about the recently unveiled AI pen, right? Or they might be replaced by gestural interfaces because of augmented reality headsets that we'll see coming soon. Or maybe we will even start seeing brain-computer interfaces. The company Neuralink that Elon Musk founded, so they're basically already running clinical trials on these brain-computer interfaces, so it's not sci-fi. The implications of that, I think, are that even complex specialist business software will be much more usable and much easier and faster to learn. Because basically users will be able to accomplish pretty much anything that they can think of. So when onboarding users, I think we'll be focusing much more on basically what to do and when to do it, as opposed to explaining to people how to do things on the UI. My second hypothesis is that the graphical user interfaces for user output will still be around for quite some time, and they will play an important role. And that's really because of the fundamentals of human cognition and visual information processing. Because when you're reading text or listening to voice, the brain processes that in a serial fashion. On the other hand, if you actually process some information visually, then the brain processes that in parallel, and the interaction throughput is much, much higher, because the human eye is really an incredible organ that's capable of processing 10 million bits of data per second. So that's why data visualization is so much more powerful and effective. And keep in mind that while the technology is changing rapidly, we as humans, physiologically, we haven't really evolved that much over the last 10,000 years or so. So we're basically still the same cavemen and cavewomen we were 10,000 years ago. It's just now that instead of spears, we are using smartphones. So I think graphical output interfaces will be around for quite some time, although they will definitely be evolving. They will be much more ubiquitous, immersive, natural, right? So, for example, they might be projected onto your surroundings or your field of vision, or they might be projected onto the palm of your hand, as we just saw recently. They'll be much more contextually, until, of course, the brain-computer interfaces will arrive, and at that point, maybe even output UIs will start disappearing. Who knows? All right, my Third hypothesis is that AI-assisted design tools will help us to create those UIs much quicker and faster and to a much higher level of quality. So I think in the future, you wouldn't really need to go to a public pattern library website or analyze your design system's patterns or components, because your AI copilot would have already done all that for you. It will already have all that knowledge. So you'll just ask your AI copilot, give me 5 variants for displaying quantitative data visually and highlight some pros and cons of those different concepts. So we'll generate a bunch of different variants and concepts for you to review. It will also provide some design critique, because it will understand which patterns work well and don't work well based on all the UX wisdom that has been published publicly over the last 2 decades or so. It might even suggest some new additions to your designs or to your solutions based on the patterns used in similar products in your industry, for example. Okay, so you've got a bunch of options. You pick one, let's say the most promising concept, you start converging, and then you can again ask your AI copilot, maybe generate 3 more variants, this time exploring more the UI execution. So it'll give you a bunch of different options, exploring different layouts and colors, while of course following the rules of your design system for stuff like spacing, colors, typography, shadows, etc., right? Or maybe you'll just sketch out a bunch of ideas and it will automatically turn those ideas into Figma specs and code components right away. And what that means that as designers, I think we'll be shifting more into a role of a visionary and a curator and editor, as opposed to being in the role of a producer of design specs and documentation. Which is great actually, because that's much more closer to the true nature of holistic product design. So I think that's what we all want to do anyway. So it will empower us to do that. And my fourth and final hypothesis is that we will also start to see generative UIs that will be created dynamically, programmatically on the fly. That might actually unlock stuff like hyper-personalization, where each unique user could potentially see a unique UI that's tailored specifically to them. So imagine a completely personalized, tailored landing page just for you, for your context of use, that's kind of assembled on the fly using your design system's components. And also, I think we'll see much more proactive UI adaptability. So for example, based on your past usage patterns in a given system, this adaptive UI might basically predict your needs, understand what workflow you're currently executing, and adjust the UI accordingly. So it could, for example, make some navigation items bigger or smaller to declutter the UI so that the navigation path is clear, or it might make some buttons larger or different colors so that it illuminates the golden path through that particular workflow that you're doing. And what that means is that I think we'll be spending less time creating individual design system components and patterns, because those will be probably auto-generated for you based on a number of prompts and parameters. And instead, we'll be doing much more systemic design work. So we won't be designing specific screens and layouts. It won't even be possible, because for a hyper-personalized adaptive UI, there will be almost infinite number of different screen permutations, right? So instead, we'll be defining rule-based systems that will assemble those UIs on the fly for each particular user, context, persona, etc., and a given workflow. So think about the implications of this for things like user onboarding or knowledge-based articles, or for customer support, right? Like the implications are pretty profound. All right, where next? Well, if we peek further into the future and beyond that, what do we see? So I think the next frontier of AI is probably, we might see AI agents that will execute whole workflows based on the goals you give them. And at that point, we might actually have AI agents talking to other AI agents without the humans in the middle. And at that point, I have no idea how the product design craft will look like or evolve, really. I think it's fair to say that given the pace of change, it's really hard to predict how the product design discipline and craft will evolve in the next 3 to 5 years. But my hope is that generative AI could be the invention that makes humankind more empowered and more equal on a truly global scale. And when speaking about AI in general, I think we're potentially on the cusp of inventing super intelligent machines. So with stuff like artificial general intelligence, which might emerge in the next couple of years or decades maybe. And if that happens, life could potentially expand to the stars and far galaxies. But of course, it could also make things much worse for humankind if we're not careful. So I think it is our responsibility to design safe AI systems that are really aligned with humankind's fundamental values and goals. And remember, nothing is inevitable until it actually happens. So let's use your responsibilities wisely. You are literally designing the future now. Cool. So thank you. Thanks so much for coming again. If you would like to chat some more, feel free to ping me an email or find me on LinkedIn. And of course, we can continue the conversations next door while having some drinks afterwards. And yeah, let's jump into the next talk.